Hello everyone. It's been a long time since I've uploaded. This video is late. It was supposed to come out in like May and it's almost September, but who really cares? Life has not waited for me at all this year, so unfortunately it's taken this long. To anyone who's mad at me still making this video, and in particular everyone who took every chance to write fan fiction about my life and abuse every time I spoke the truth, in the words of a great stallion, fuck y'all. I ain't gotta clear my name on a motherfucking thing. But I'm finna get this shit off my chest and lay it to rest. Let's go.
The following includes an AI replica of Hiten's voice used to read text that she has written. I condemn all usage of an AI replicated voice to frame anyone for words they did not speak or type.
As a brief trigger warning, this video is going to discuss topics of sexual assault, suicide, abuse, victim shaming, abuse apology, and many instances of sexual victimization of a minor. So if any of that is triggering to you, please don't feel pressured to stay. Another disclaimer, the main subject discussed in this video has already stated that she will not be watching this video, as she thinks it would just harm her health and she wants to respect that she was asked to leave me alone. I'm actually totally fine with that decision because, as you'll see, I don't want her talking about things anymore since she can't be truthful. And as far as I can tell, she's actually been doing a good job and keeping her nose in her business where it belongs. I did write a lot of the script to address her in second person because that's just how I wrote it, but just know that she will not be watching this video according to herself. Do not prod and poke at her anywhere to watch this video. I'm not saying you can't talk about the situation at all, but do not provoke her. I'm making this video because I want my story to be known comprehensively and for that information to be immortalized. Otherwise, if you have not kept up with this situation from past old videos or need a refresher, let me just give you a brief summary. Starting in 2019, when I was 16 years old, and for 2 years after, I was emotionally abused, gaslit, threatened, and emotionally blackmailed through suicide by a former YouTuber and my friend at the time, Faghost, also known by their real name Liam or by their current aliases Billy and Jelly Skelly. Faghost made me and two others by the names of Klownteeth and Pondersprocket believe that we helped get a mentally ill sexual assault victim arrested who would later kill herself in police custody. We did not know that she was a victim of sexual assault at the time we were trying to get her arrested, nor the extent of her apparent mental health issues. During that time, we antagonized her for the hurt she was causing and lies she was spreading about our friend. Of course, only for us to be told by Faghost themselves that one of those lies, that being that she and another girl who also committed suicide were sexually assaulted by Faghost at a house party, was true. After this period, Faghost regularly displayed suicidal ideations and would even threaten to kill themselves, as shown in my original video. They also decided to check in with me regularly in private to make sure I wasn't telling anyone about the story. Being made to believe I had a hand in one person's suicide, I did not want to do anything that would upset them until over a year later in 2021 when I was freshly 18, when the memories of the story I was told made me so uneasy that I confided in Klownteeth about my feelings and how uncomfortable I was, knowing what I knew about Faghost and how they continued to act. When they found out about this and confronting me did not go well, they relentlessly hounded Kylie for a month about my suspicions, made me out to be the villain, said that I was talking shit about her, and even tried to pit Ponder against me, saying that I might be plotting something. Wait for it. After finally leaving me and Clown alone after she essentially begged for them to calm down about me, I once again kept quiet until November, when I told another YouTuber that I was close friends with at the time what was happening. Everyone cut Faghost off, and on December 5th, 2021, I posted my video, Faghost Needs to Leave. 2 days after the upload of my video, Faghost uploaded their own video proving that the story they told us about the assault, the one that they harassed me and my friend over and tried to pit my friend against me for believing, was a lie. The girl that we had antagonized and helped get arrested was a Faghost sock puppet account, as was the Twitter account that tried exposing them. When I found this out, I was possibly more angry in my life than I ever had been. I had posted a comment on Faghost's video telling them that I wanted their social media presence entirely removed, which included deleting their Twitter and YouTube. Faghost started leaving old DM groups that we shared, which I continued to kick them out of and posted about, and I celebrated when they deleted their socials. This is where things take a shift, as at that point, another commentator by the name of Hiten made a thread about me and how much of a terrible person I was. I'm just gonna let the thread play out right now so we can all hear exactly what was said.
I want to talk about this Phagos thing real quick, because this has escalated to a point I'm not comfortable saying nothing. Dulu's video is bad. The constant claims of manipulation, while actively showing them gaslighting him into believing he was a worse person than he was, is vile and disgusting. Watching them actively cheer on the downfall of someone they admitted to knowing was emotionally fragile and going into the comments of him telling his side of the story of what is admittedly interpersonal drama that they instigated and telling him to disappear is reckless at best. You going into private chats and bullying him, then going into the place where he is trying to clear up his side of the drama is no better than him shadowing you in calls. It's bullying someone you know is mentally ill into isolation, and that's dangerous! It makes sense that you were recording Spoctor's sub count dropping for Penta if this is how you act. You didn't do this because you cared about victims. If he hadn't personally slighted you, we wouldn't know about any of this. If anything, this was Clown's story to tell, not yours. You don't get to play the weeping, tragic victim for supporting your friend through a hard time, just like I don't get to do so for helping my friends deal with your bullshit when you do this to friends over a small tiff. I feel bad for Clown. I feel bad for Phagos. You're a manipulative, spiteful bitch who wants to win a fight, not help a victim. It's real rat bitch behavior, and I'd like to say I'm disappointed. But in order for that to be true, I'd have to be surprised. TLDR, this is going to get messier. And you'd better reel it the fuck in or there might end up being actual blood on your hands this time. Dial it the fuck back! Quick amendment because I do want this to be clear. If what Phagos is being accused of is true, then 100% this should be known, called out, and atoned for. This just isn't the way to do it. Open harassment of someone who everyone admitted to knowing is unstable, isn't it? I'm pissed at Junkie for ruining my commentary career, fucking up several relationships, and kickstarting several years of paranoia and fear, for example. I'm not gonna tap dance on Twitter about his numbers going down and people breaking friendships with him.
When my original video came out, the extent of which Phagos built their lie and forced it on me while I was a minor wasn't public knowledge, because I didn't realize that would be important at the time, because I thought it was true. But you know what? That doesn't matter, because nothing in the world could have made Hiten's thread and the things she said about me understandable. What level of fucked up do you have to be to hear a story of a grown adult lying to a minor about sexual assault and suicide, and then claim that the person lied to was the gaslighting manipulative bitch and wasn't a victim? And that if they don't stop talking about the person who lied to them, then they're gonna be responsible for that liar's suicide or any other bodily harm. Do you understand how fucking sick that is? And to then try and bring up a mistake the victim made when they were 15 years old as a means to try and character assassinate them? That, in particular, by the way, is really funny, and I'm just gonna be a bitch here because this look back has been over 2 years in the goddamn making. Coming from a bitch who was participating in the collective bullying of Princess Elizabeth as a 19-year-old. And for those of you wondering, yes, this does mean that at the age where I was coming forward about the abuse I dealt with for 2 years and getting shat on by my old community, Hiten was beefing with an autistic 14-year-old on DeviantArt. And honestly, good for her. I'd rather her be a dick online at that age than dealing with whatever the fuck was happening to me. Glass houses, bitch. I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, yes, I recorded Spoctor's sub count going down as a 15-year-old when he was falsely accused at the time of being a sexual predator. I also publicly apologized for doing it when I was 16. Here's something weird though, cause I don't know what it is with Hiten having such a problem with people doing and saying mean shit to people who are believed to be sex pests. Maybe look into that. Anyways, I immediately responded to Hiten's thread, pointing out the disgusting behavior she displayed and how she had no grounds to make the claims about me that she did, which then led to Hiten deflecting and making even more unfounded claims about me, which we'll go into more detail at a later point. After a quick back and forth, Hiten stopped talking about me, but as you'll see, that was far from the end of it. Because after Hiten's thread, and after I responded, several people started repeating the same talking points that Hiten did, which included random people in the community directly parroting Hiten mean and putting very triggering things in my mentions, like that I don't actually care about what Fagos did and that I'll be to blame if they kill themselves, or others telling me to grow up and stop treating the situation like a game, and that I was a toxic piece of trash, so fuck me. It also included several creators, small and large, like Artemi Musha, an old commentator, who posted a tweet thread about how if I wanted his sympathy, I was gonna have to mind my manners with Fagos, basically admitting that he and the others in this community care more about the optics of how a victim deals with their abuse than the abuser in question's actions. Musha would even later go on to take time out of his own video detailing abuse he had gone through to posture about how much of a better victim he was going to be than me, and called me disgusting.
Rachel may have pages and pages worth of unsettling baggage, but she is still a human being at the end of the day, and nobody, least of all me, should wish or hope for harm to come to her. For this reason, in light of recent events, I am obligated to mention that I firmly and explicitly refuse to take victory laps around the situation, even on the off chance that everything does go the way I hope it will. Especially not if Rachel is drawn into an emotional and mental low point because of this. I've seen the tactless way that Dulu acted after calling out Fagos' manipulative behaviour and instabilities, and having seen the repulsive defences people have made in their favour after Dulu was called out for this tactlessness, I do not wish to reenact that mistake.
Another person who chimed in at the time was Manga Common, a channel with over 100,000 subscribers at the time, who, while was much tamer in the things he said about me, still used my abuse situation to complain for half a thread about how I blocked him, which... Jesus fucking Christ. Also, after admitting to not having watched my video because he didn't care, still went out of his way to unsettledly pry people into giving him screenshots of my outburst so that he could then talk about how egotistical I was coming off. I honest to God despise this type of behavior because of how cowardly it is. Like, you want to involve yourself in a situation that has nothing to do with you to throw your 2 cents in, but not do any of the work that should come with doing that and present yourself as someone who doesn't care. If you actually didn't care, you would have shut the fuck up after condemning Fagos instead of using it to bitch about how the victim blocked you before going around to snoop for more things to comment on. You think you're being slick? And you're not. You're just being a nuisance. There was also notable FCK member and groomer enabler Nezzy Monster, who very discreetly, not really, tweeted that day insinuating that I was simply waiting for the opportunity to treat someone like garbage and didn't care about the safety of others like I stated, despite me being arguably the most harmed and vulnerable subject of Liam's abuse. I love having to point that out because you fucks hated me so much. Which is also funny because now that Nezzy has been in the hot seat for damn near a year for enabling a groomer and lying about that groomer's actions and their knowledge of them to others in the community, has switched to the defense that they were a stupid 19-year-old and obviously shouldn't be held to the same standard as today. So where was that compassion and understanding for me when I was 19 and had a single outburst on Twitter? Especially when I didn't even do anything actually wrong. I should note that I called Nezzy out on this on Twitter recently, and instead of apologizing, they simply had another enabler of shit behavior in the community, Avi Haltman, block me. Bitches act like accountability shot their parents in front of them, I swear to God. So as you can guess, that day was awful. There were a few people, not creators, who stepped in to defend me and try and get these people to empathize with how angry I was, and I really do appreciate those people. I thank you very much for trying to help me in that situation. Despite those few though, the only public things creators said about me were condemnations of me, while the greater community stayed completely silent on the way I was being treated, because most of them agreed with it. Just 2 weeks later, Hiten was tone policed for her junkie video by Spoctor, and every single person who was silent when she did it to me jumped with their pitchforks to defend her like they all suddenly decided that tone policing is wrong, actually. Love that. Never mind the fact that Heaton's popularity was bolstered by this, and she became known for being tone policed when she had no problem doing the tone policing earlier that same goddamn month. This made me feel absolutely horrible, leaving me to wonder why no one had a problem when it was done to me enough to speak up about it, and wondering who I could even trust at that point. Spoilers, it was practically no one. In early 2022, I found out that Musha made that video where they publicly shamed me to bolster their own image as a victim, and no one had a problem with that either. Many of you know that 2022 was a rough year for me, mostly for reasons outside of the internet, but I just want you to know that all of this nonsense was happening at the same time that every other facet of my life was on fire. So, you know, horrible all around. So horrible, in fact, that in September of 2022, I quit YouTube as a hobby, passion, and source of income for me that I made a lot of connections with because I just felt so unwanted and hated by the way people talked about me and the abuse I endured. And a month later, Hiten decided to respond to comments asking her about why she thought it was okay to talk to me like she did, and not only lied about the things I did in my abuse situation, but ended off by claiming that I was an aggressor in the shit Faghost put me through. Fast forward to March of this year, and the Rosa Call was re-uploaded and caught a lot of people's attention. The Rosa Call, for those wondering, was a voice call in the now defunct server called The Senate that happened on January 31st, 2023, wherein a disabled woman responsible for not banning a predator in a friend's server was verbally abused, called slurs, misconstrued, and sexually harassed for nearly 4 hours. The owner of the server, who also controlled the call, was YouTuber Lio Convoy, who was an, at the time, self-proclaimed predator hunter. He did apologize for that call, but however people decide to take it moving forward is up to them. As for me, I had known of this call's presence for a while because my friend Ponder Sprocket had brought it up and told me how much of the Senate server was shitting on her for speaking up during it, but I didn't actually know any of what was actually said. I did know, however, that Hiten was part of it playing defense for the call's behavior, though again I didn't know exactly what she said. Thankfully, another YouTuber, Omnia, made a couple of videos going over the call in detail, and the second one included clips of what Hiten said.
I think the insults, like, is where we're drawing the line. The ad hom, I think, is ridiculous. Because in a normal situation where this is a normal kind of debate, I would agree with you 100%. I'd be like, yeah, that's too far. That's this, that, and the other. This is not that, like, very transparently. This is a person who openly faked a panic attack while being confronted about actively letting pedophiles occupy a space, and who pretended to cry on live stream about it. Like, this is the thing where I'm gonna have apparently one of the hot takes of the room and say, listen, there is a point where, yes, a calm conversation can be had. I have no problem with character assassination of someone who actively downplayed the grooming of children. And I think the idea that saying things that are incredibly mean to them, like calling them a whore and stupid, is, I think the fact that that's where the line's being drawn is insane.
When I heard the way this woman was defending the group insulting and ableist, misogynistic harassment of a woman with autism severe enough that she needed a caretaker at the age of 30, during a point in time when she was still completely backing the revolting things she had said about me for celebrating my abuser leaving her platforms, I was completely pissed, to say the least. And you know what? I felt the same way about her video on Spoctor, where she complained endlessly about having been tone policed by him and how horrible he was for doing that and not seeing her as a victim. Wow! That's crazy, Hiten. Honestly, that video is one of the worst things you can listen to when you're aware of how she completely stood by the way she treated me and would even defend her behavior in the comments when confronted, as previously mentioned. It highlights her hypocrisy in a blinding light and shows her absolute refusal to empathize with me as a human being, you know, despite the fact that she was able to sympathize with the grown-ass adult that abused me with ease from the start. Seriously, if you took a shot every time she leaves a criticism against Spoctor in that video that could come ramming into her headlight-lit fuck-ass deer face with the same force and validity, you'd need to call poison control by the end.
You have a lot of fucking nerve telling people how they're allowed to feel and react to something that ruined their life. Or is it just different when you do it? You're saying that a victim has no right to take an aggressive, angry tone with someone who hurt them. Rules for thee and not for me? Great. You, a fucking outsider who knew jack and shit, does not get to choose the tone I take with people who hurt me, just as I don't get to do that for you. You are literally telling victims that the people who commentate on their pain are more justified to anger than they are. It seems like he always goes in emotion first and brainwaves third, but laying out this in front of me, it seems like nothing but malice. So he lies again about not knowing the context, he doubles down on his statement that I took the wrong tone, and implies he didn't even see me as a victim. Great.
glad to know that Lily's Garden ads in a FurCon video were more important than you giving that victim a voice. This is peak victim blaming and tone policing, and I'm tired of you pretending that you're a better person when it's not looking like that's true either. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of having people who hurt me have the last word, though, so here I am.
So yeah, it pissed me off that she took 2 years to even realize that the way she talked about me was wrong in any way and dish out 2 tepid apologies that rival the Notes app apologies of the 2010s in terms of thought and sincerity. More on that later. So what did I do? I put her on blast. And in calling out her hypocrisy, I wanted to test something by seeing how Hiten would react to being hit with the same energy and vitriol that she repeatedly put out at her targets. I hit hard and I hit a lot. And Hiten immediately folded. She locked her account and posted a passive-aggressive tweet with some questionable content about how she'd be lucky if she didn't end up in the hospital, followed by a passive-aggressive send-off saying, "Take your W, I guess." This was a wild reaction coming from someone who has made her YouTube career doing epic ponage on the people who wronged her, even boasting about how she'll always be able to outscream anyone. Guess actions speak louder than words? Musha also made a brief reemergence during this time, comparing me to several sex pests and maybe even alluded to wanting to tell me to hurt myself or worse before getting ethered out of existence, ending by giving off an even more passive-aggressive exit than I'm sure Hiten could ever hope to give. However, before he did that, he responded to Clownteeth when she defended me and said that he didn't like her bringing Ray's name into this. Dumbass, that was you who did that. But actually, I'll let Clownteeth get her lick back on that later. Spoilers. But yeah, very normal behavior coming from these people. Anyways, after silence for 20 days from Hiten, she released a statement in which she begins off by saying she won't be making any excuses for behavior, as she then proceeds to lie about me, her actions, and even blame my original video for why she was so grossly misinformed about my abuse. That is why we're here today. I'm going to react to Hiten's document point by point and debunk everything. I will say this right now. I have more proof than I will be letting on. I'm choosing not to show all of it publicly out of respect for some of the people involved. However, if anyone wants to continue lying about the private situations that I have proof for, I will post what I have. I am not one to just throw private screenshots around like it's nothing, but when someone is publicly lying about private events, that is enough for me to violate that privacy because they are violating the public's trust. However, this is the one chance I'm giving for things not to go there. I'm not playing around. If the lying continues, I will make a pinned comment linking to any tweet I post with any proof that needs to be posted that I have. I'll even label the links and have that shit organized. Hand to God. Anyways, on to Hiten's document. The document starts with Hiten addressing a situation with someone who I don't really know or keep up with, and as far as I can tell, that person's been defending themselves just fine. So we're going to skip over that part and go straight to the part of the document where she talks about the Rosa Senate call that had blown up in recent times.
Second is the Rosa call, where people are getting the idea I said that it was okay to tell her to die, slut-shamed, or call her slurs. I don't know, because I literally said the opposite. I specifically said in that call, I disavowed calling her slurs or going that far. What I condoned was the pettier insults.
One of the insults you specifically cited as being okay in the clips I posted was calling Rosa a whore. That is very blatant slut-shaming. Rosa is also a victim of SA, which, again, no one in the call knew, but that's why you shouldn't slut-shame and use insults like that in that manner towards someone. I'm not talking about friends calling each other sluts and whores and bitches and whatever. That's an entirely different ballpark and is not at all what's happening here. The slut-shaming was deliberately malicious and was meant to demean Rosa in a sexual and misogynistic manner. Rosa was also called fat and made fun of for her living situation and needing a caretaker for her disability, both of which were discussed while you were there listening. It's in the video. I did the math on the timestamps. Do not test me on this. You did not condemn any of that. All you wanted to do in that call was defend your right to insult people who you think deserve it, with slurs and calling family members being seemingly the only things off the table. However, I would like to set the record straight that I did not ever say that Hiten defended the use of slurs, because I know she didn't, because I listened to that call and I know what I'm talking about. However, I should also make note that slurs isn't the only way to express bigoted sentiment, as there's a lot in that call even without the slurs.
If you want to get mad at me, sure, but I have the hot take to this day that a pedophile enabler doesn't deserve my civility.
Keep this bit in mind because we're going to be coming back to it in detail later on.
I think when when someone is a danger to children and allows multiple to be groomed in their presence, ambivalence to calling them ugly or stupid isn't a high crime. In that full call, I see Ponder and Harley's side, and we end up shaking hands in the middle. Not only have I never condoned the call since, but I also was one of the moderators who called for blood sports to be removed from the Senate, and was the only mod to put forward that we stop using slurs entirely after that call.
Hiten, if you don't want people thinking that you condone an event that you publicly took part in and defended at the time it was happening, you need to publicly retract your defense of the event and condemn it. It is insane to me that this is not clicking for someone who openly and loudly complained about people who wrong her, one of them very publicly, for not retracting and correcting one of their statements about her. This isn't rocket science. She then goes on to show proof of her denouncing the use of slurs in the Senate server, which I'm not going to interrogate because, again, I never claimed the contrary. After that, she moves on to the main focus of the document, which is me, and how she handled my abuse situation with Faghost.
Finally, I want to talk about Chuli. I want to open up by saying again that the things I said were wrong. I am not going to make an excuse for them. I never have, and she reserves the right to be mad at me. I'm not saying she can't be frustrated by that thread. What she doesn't have the right to do is lie about my intent and paint me as a monster to others.
I think it's hilarious that Hiten spent 2 years lying about me, my intentions, my actions, painting me as an aggressor in my own abuse, turning me into the villain of my own abuse, and had no problem with that until 3 people consecutively came to her and told her that she fucked up. But I spend a couple of weeks talking about things she actually did with a lot of proof, as we'll get into, and suddenly I'm lying about her intent and painting her as a monster. Okay, we'll see how those statements hold up.
So here's the thing. I did apologize for those things. Twice. Once publicly and once in private. The private apology came first. It was expressed that they wanted the original thread down, and a public apology made, so I did.
I think it's a little weird that she's bringing this up as though it's some kind of reveal when I've been transparent when all of this blew up about the fact that Hiten apologized. And my response to the first apology is literally my pinned tweet. I guess you could say that I never explicitly called the second one an apology, and that's fair, I guess. But I did talk about the contents of both apologies publicly already and directly showed them. A few people, like Musha, have criticized me for carrying on a situation that has already been resolved with this whole thing, which is just code word for she apologized, so shut up and move on. When I made it very clear in my public response to her one and only public apology that I was not happy with how she minimized all her horrendous actions towards me as just some out-of-pocket behavior, because it was insulting. And before anyone jumps me for being too critical of Heaton's apology, I'm not really interested in taking into consideration how other people, some of whom participated in the public shitting on me and still haven't apologized at all, feel about how I talk about the person that did the absolute most to lie about my abuse, make me the villain of it, and sympathize with my abuser, only to then delete her thread and issue a 3-tweet long apology that doesn't mention my name once, where she spends 2 sentences retracting what she said in the vaguest way possible after 2 years. That's straight up not good enough. Especially when the first apology you dropped off at my door through Aaron was prefaced with you talking about all the things you didn't want to do for an apology. We'll get into why I hated that apology in more detail later because she brings it up. But newsflash, guys, basing your apologies for the harm you did to others on your convenience is wildly inappropriate. I never accepted Heaton's apologies. In fact, the aforementioned pinned tweet ends with me saying fuck you to Hiten and everyone who ever sided with her. So how anyone got the idea that things were resolved after I publicly denounced her apology is wild to me.
Why did it take a year? Simple. I didn't know anyone had a problem. Chuli and I have blocked each other. Safe to say I don't like her and she doesn't like me. Once again, I respect a boundary, and when I'm blocked, I don't circumvent it to watch the people I don't like. If I blocked you, I wouldn't want to see you. Simple as that. However, nobody ever reached out to tell me where I crossed a line at the time, so naturally, I didn't think I did.
I'm gonna say this next part, and I'm gonna try not to sound like a total bitch, but this needs to be said. Hiten, if no one really did come to you like you said, which did not happen, we'll get into it in a minute, there is a reason why people do not approach you, and that is because of how you are. In private and in public, you will twist people's words, make things about you that are not about you, ascribe intent that is not there, talk down to people, and be an absolute chore to deal with. I think the argument that we had back in 2019 that you pushed me to post by lying about it proved that a lot more than whatever the hell you thought it proved. In that argument, you started by telling me how I felt about the topic at hand. And when I told you to stop and clarified that I was just asking to hear about other apparent solutions because nothing from what I had heard at that point convinced me that they would work, you just condescended me with, well, you've never been in this situation before, I'd imagine. Like, Hiten, neither had you. No one in your life had a giant platform that entirely centered around and profited from actively suffering from the most deadly mental illness in the world. And when I asked you to elaborate on the possible solutions for this situation, you started screaming at me about how I was demanding you divulge personal stories about self-harm and suicidality, even when I was directly telling you that I was not asking for that. And I know that this argument happened literally 5 years ago, but given more recent arguments I've seen that I choose not to disclose right now, take that with what you will, I would be lying if I said these trains aren't still present in the current day. You also straight up don't get to say that no one ever told you anything. No. You were confronted, several times even, publicly about your tweets and actions towards me. You just deflected and dodged and lied whenever you were called out, much like you still are. You don't get to say, but no one ever told me I crossed a line as an excuse for why it took this long, when that is exactly what I told you when I initially responded. Since the beginning, from when all of this happened, I called your threat about me victim shaming. I called you out for telling me I'd be responsible for Fagos killing themselves. I called you out for lying about my intentions and comparing me to a serial abuser. And I told you didn't know me well enough to make the character adjustments like you had, and I told you to stay in your lane. And what did you do? You completely ignored everything I called out and deflected, saying that the reason why you don't talk to me anymore is because I tried to pry private mental health information about one of your friends out of you, which was a lie about that private argument that you probably didn't think I could argue. But surprise, I could, and when I proved to the public that you had lied about what happened in that argument, did you fess up and apologize? Did you retract anything? No, Hiten. You accused me of stalking you and said that if I said anything more about you shit-talking me, then I would be block evading to harass you. Then fast forward to October 2022 when you were directly confronted about the tone policing in your comments of the video where you bitched for 40 minutes about being tone policed and having your victimhood denied by a public figure. And instead of reflecting about your actions, you lied about me and claimed I did things that straight up didn't happen and ended off by saying that I stooped to Fagos level and was an aggressor in my own abuse. So you want to come on here and be all like, well, no one told me. Hiten, you're insufferable to deal with. And you have been every single time you've been confronted about your actions in this situation, which is probably why you're surrounded by yes men, half of which are probably too scared to confront you about anything you do, because this is how you are. It should not be the responsibility of other people, especially other victims like Clown and Ponder, to make sure that you aren't being a disgusting human being. Seriously, how fucking old are you? And also, if I'm being honest, you don't deserve a private confrontation for being a horrendous piece of shit in public. You deserved to be put on blast publicly, which is why I did it.
A few people have asked why it was sent through Aaron and not directly. Well, earlier on, I had been told that I was asked not to be present for the Fagos call in the Senate by Chuli. Naturally, I assumed this meant that she didn't want to be around me. So I respected the boundary and sent it through an intermediary I knew we could both trust. It's also why I haven't attempted to make contact since. When people express they don't want to be around me, I don't put myself in proximity to them.
Hiten, that's not what happened and you know it. First of all, the screenshots don't align with the timeline you gave us. I find it really weird that she tries to paint herself as someone noble that's just trying to respect my boundaries because I had asked for her not to be present in the Fagos Senate call, and that's why she sent it through a third party, when that apology was sent to me through Aaron over a month before Fagos even asked Lio for a call in the Senate. And that is because the timeline is wrong. Because Hiten is lying. Hiten did not send that apology through Aaron because she didn't want to disrespect my boundaries. She literally explained why she did it the way that she did in the beginning of her apology. I don't know why she's acting like we can't read the words she herself typed out that very obviously contradict the story she's telling. A very big thing that's missing from here is that Hiten will later talk about how 3 people, that being Lyle Convoy, Aaron Tempest, and Ponder Sprocket, approached her this year, as in after both the private and public apologies, That's not how that happened. You see, how the story actually goes is I approached Lio on September 18th of last year while Ponder, Clown, and I were working on our Fagos video, which is still in progress. And I asked him if he could record a snippet denouncing the things said about me the day Fagos video dropped, like he had in a call prior to all of this where I explained the Fagos situation to him. He asked for proof, and I sent it to him, which included Heten's tweets. He also asked why I wanted his take in particular, and I was honest and said it was because of his standing in the community, which at the time was very sturdy. Lio did not make a recording at the time, and instead went to Hiten to talk to her about her tweets. I had mixed feelings about this, but I've since learned that he didn't make one at the time because hopeless motherfucking peaches made it their life goal to make sure that Lio and the community didn't trust us in the slightest because we just use him. So, the very reason why I felt I should ask someone with a stable standing in the community in the first place. Wild that they would say that about me given their history of events. These fucking people, man. Anyways, I don't hold anything personally against Lio for that, and to talk about Lio for a second, actually. I am extremely disappointed in him this year, because on one hand, I do not approve of practically anything he's done since the Cat Slayer, Senate 2.0, whatever the fuck we're calling it, has been created. I think I was pretty evidently upset in the chat of Streamline Workshop and Mali's stream about him over what I was seeing and hearing. But I also want to address that Lio has done good things for me. The Fagos call being the most obvious instance of that. But also how he defended me in the Cat Slayer when the server was really mad at me and spreading a ton of false information about me.
Look, I think it just needs to be recognized, and everybody's talking about how, Chuli's wanting, sympathy in droves. I don't think that's what Chuli wants, and frankly, even if that is what they wanted, this full-grown adult dicked with them when they were a kid, harassed them, stalked them, gaslit them, got them to believe they did horrible things when they had literally nothing to do with anything because it wasn't real, and then got dogged on for essentially victory lapping when Fagos was running away from everything. I think Chuli's due a little more than a bit of sympathy. That does something to people. I don't understand why this is a difficult concept. I think there's some leniency to be given. I think that here's the problem when it comes to interpersonal things. And Lord knows I struggle with this too. I mean, obviously, how many times have you heard me yell, "Oh, you're X age, how do you not know?" Chuli, from what I can tell, from what very little I do know, is they probably had to grow up pretty doggone fast. They're going to be more competent at 19 than perhaps other people would be. Maybe even perhaps more than I was. So I think that it's not fair to compare yourself to somebody else at that time frame. I get what Chuli's saying, but not everybody has the same equipment. So I think that there has to be some nuance there. I think that in situations like this, there has to be a wider range, and there also has to be a lot more mercy and grace shown. But that's also my personal opinion, having dealt with a lot of stuff like this. Now, what I will say that I think needs to 100% come to a stop here is everybody immediately wanting to be negative or dog on Chuli without understanding where Chuli's coming from here. Because you got to keep in mind, they dealt with a lunatic for a while, and then when they finally start taking the power back, they get dogged on by no small part of their own community. That had to be extremely isolating. So no, I don't blame Chuli for being angry.
So on one hand, I'm thankful for those things, and I don't want anyone to say that I'm not. But it almost upsets me even more because then I know that this man who was doing what I would consider, in very brief terminology, pretty bad things, is also capable of demonstrating such well-articulated, sweet, unapologetic empathy towards me to a crowd who doesn't want to empathize with me. So that's where I'm at right now. I can give credit where credit is due, but I also don't support Lio being in charge of things that carry weight and can have an effect on other people, because it's evident to me that he's not capable of handling these situations properly. So, anyways, back to Hiten, our main star. Fast forwarding from September to November 5th of last year, I am just trying to enjoy my life. I just turned 21. I was getting ready to see Doja Cat in concert for her Scarlet Tour, which was amazing, by the way. And out of nowhere, I get a message from Aaron Tempest relaying Heten's private apology. I immediately did not like this apology for several reasons, so let's get into it.
Hey, I asked Aaron to send you this because I really don't want to get into a call if I can just sum it up here. Neither of us like each other, and neither of us need the stress.
I know we're only 2 sentences in, but I'm going to be honest, this is a really shitty way to preface an apology, and it's really insulting that you think you can just come on here and tell the public that you sent this apology out of respect for my boundaries, when this is literally how you started the first apology you ever sent me after the 2 years where you were continuously disgusting in the things you said about me and the abuse I faced. The fact that you thought you, as the person who did the harm, could come up to me and just go, I don't want to get into a call because we both don't like each other and we don't need to, as the person apologizing, and just drop it off at my doorstep without any kind of public retraction, or even asking if there was anything I wanted you to do to help remedy the harm you caused, it really just showed me how much you meant this apology and cared about accountability, which is barely at all, if at all. She then went on to apologize for insinuating that Phagos didn't hurt or victimize me, and actually empathized with me for the one and only time during this entire debacle, talking about how she should have known better than to downplay my pain as that's something that's happened to her. But we'll see as I'm about to talk more in detail about how long that lasted. After this was sent to me, I knew I didn't like it, but I also didn't want you to just react right out of the gate. I wanted to wait and see if she had the good sense to correct what she publicly said about me. I asked anyone I had talked to about Hiten if they had said anything, and I found out that the reason why Hiten apologized to me was because Ponder had been in a VC with some SCC people and candidly talked about what Hiten did without naming her. Aaron Tempest, who was in that call, was able to figure out just from the description of victim shaming that it was Hiten, and when asked if that's who Ponder was talking about, had it confirmed to him by her. Aaron basically immediately left the call, and the next day I ended up with that apology from Hiten. So a month went by and nothing. No retraction, all of the threads still up. Come to find out that that's because she still stood by the rest of her thread. The claiming that I gaslit Phagos, the tone policing, the guilting me by saying that if I kept tweeting then Phagos might kill themselves and it'll be my fault. Yeah, she stood by all of that still. And I know that because that's what she told Ponder when she found out that Clown and I had asked her not to be present in the Phagos Senate call. Yeah, remember how she said she heard about that and just naturally assumed that we must not want to be around her? Well, that didn't happen. Hiten immediately contested that request to Ponder, demanding to know why we were trying to go above her and just being exactly how I described her earlier. And that is what led to the third confrontation about her thread and what finally made her take down the entire thing and issue a public apology. So Hiten, how are you going to sit here and say that I'm lying about your intent? Hiten, you're lying about your intent. Even when you speak your truth about what your intent apparently is, it's so easily disprovable because you would have to be a time traveler in order for it to even be possible. My truth and the truth about what you did and why you did it comes from your literal words that you speak and type. If you don't want to be painted as a monster, do not fucking act like a monster. Especially if you're going to then claim I'm lying when I go off about what you have said and your only alternative for your reasoning is either literally physically impossible or stupidly unbelievable. I'm gonna go ahead and move on now and let a decent chunk of the document play as there's a lot that Hiten explains, so I'm just gonna let her do all of that before interjecting again.
In regards to the comments about tone policing, I've made it no secret that I don't like victory lapping, but I have to make clear why. I don't like the idea of dancing on someone's downfall publicly because I feel like it's disrespectful to the people who were victimized and turned something very dangerous into entertainment for bystanders. If Chuli wanted to celebrate, they were more than allowed to. I just wouldn't have done it publicly. We're allowed to disagree, but I don't like it. Never have. Didn't like it when people did it for me either, as a matter of fact. Knowing what I know now, I understand it. I personally wouldn't have done it, but condemning it publicly was not correct on my end as well. I also thought, and still think, that prodding at people who are unstable is dangerous. As someone who has not only been that unstable, but has been surrounded by the aftermath of that instability, I don't condone it. Not when Chuli does it, and not when Lio does it either. I've told the old man I'll never push those things because I know that if something happens, the suffering that follows is on my hands and I can't take that. Agree to disagree if you want, but having spent most of my life surrounded by the aftermath of suicides that have been both painful for the victim and the people around them at the time, I'm a little more cautious than most.
I fully respect that someone may have reasons for not personally wanting to do something or refusing to condone a type of behavior. But what confuses me is that that was never the issue here. No one had a problem with what Hiten personally refuses to do in her situations. I'm sure most people didn't give a shit. Where the issue lies is how you tried to control what I was allowed to say to someone that abused me and how you did that. Like, it's interesting to me that you talk about how you think victory lapping is disrespectful to victims, despite me being the youngest victim of hers, but forget to mention that the only way your standards would be applicable to me is if you didn't see me as a victim, which is exactly what happened. Also, to be frank, I have my own doubts about this whole paragraph. I'm not going to doubt your experiences, but I am going to doubt the stability and consistency of the morality you say stems from those experiences. Because you have allowed, endorsed, and even done everything that you're saying here is horrible and that you would never do. Yet it's clear to me that you either intentionally are trying to categorize your actions as something else, or are so biased that you can't even see what you're actually doing. Because I will say this right now. It is ridiculous to speak about this as though there was only one way in which the way you talk about someone online can turn the damage they did into entertainment and push them into a negative or potentially dangerous headspace. And you are too grown to be using personal trauma as a morality compass that everyone else needs to follow. Like, Hiten, you insinuated that me simply putting you on blast on Twitter in the mean way that I did was gonna land you in the hospital. So does that mean that no one is allowed to do Twitter callouts or even just directly call someone out in a mean way? If that's the case, then you're definitely in the hot seat, considering that's, the reason why your channel ever got as big as it did. I also feel the need to point out the wild absurdity that Hiten is talking about how she's extra cautious not to do things that she thinks might put people over the edge because she just can't handle how it would feel if anyone was pushed over the edge, and how she hates victory lapping so much because it turns trauma and hurt into entertainment, all while modding for the Senate server. As in, the server that recorded and published pieces of shit, and sometimes not, getting dunked on for other people to watch and listen to. With the owner even referring to those videos several times as drawing background noise. Is that not literally turning others' trauma into entertainment? And I'm not even saying that inherently needs to be a bad thing. I was legitimately helped by Lyle through the Senate server when he allowed me, Ponder, and Clown to jump Fagos when she tried to lie about us. That call was publicized, and I'm gonna be honest, was pretty goddamn entertaining, but it's still turning trauma into content for others to consume, is it not? You also state that you think prodding at unstable people is dangerous and that you would never do it, but again, your descriptions are too vague, because, like, realistically, what counts as prodding at people who are unstable? Because at face value, that certainly sounds like it can apply to some of the things that you have defended, like the Rosa call, and you know what, let's go further, because that also sounds very applicable to your videos, like this one. How are you going to say that you think prodding at emotionally unstable people and victory lapping on their excommunication is dangerous, and then make a video titled "Good Riddance" with a thumbnail of you looming over the cowering people you're ostracizing, wherein you continuously scream into your microphone about them, tout how they'll never be allowed back into the community, and even out new accounts that one of them is making?
Tippy makes an alt account because of course she does. She wants to take accountability after all. Keyblade then leaks his DMs with Susie to a private server. Tippy joins in on trying to paint her as two-faced, of course. Tippy has another alt. If none of you can be adults willingly, fine. I will make you be an adult, and you will take the accountability in the way that you should be taking it, not the way you want to take it. No hiding, no running. You are done. Good riddance.
So you're allowed to do all that and then defend yourself by being like, yeah, I just have the hot take that pedo enablers and shitstains don't deserve my civility. But I'm a piece of shit because I included crab emojis. Okay. Another huge reason as to why I'm bringing this up is that one of the people in the thumbnail, who is also the person whose new accounts she kept exposing, publicly expressed suicidal ideation prior to Hiten's video. And for that matter, everyone else's videos on that fucking situation. She was condemned and publicly chastised for doing that. And her ideation was never really even taken seriously or even acknowledged by Hiten from what I can tell, which is really weird for someone who cared so much about the mental health of a self-admitted sex offender and chronic liar.
Tippy then then goes on to sad girl post on Twitter about how sad she is about the fact that she let a predator's dick rider share spaces with his victims.
That's even assuming that Hiten even believes in the person's ideation, because as far as I can tell, she has no problem outright denying the mental health of people she doesn't like. Do I now get to come on here and claim that you're a liar and faking your nervous breakdown because I don't like you? Or worse, because you clarified your safety at a later point in time? You know, that thing that you did to Fran, who was a minor at the time? And again, none of this explains why you were so uniquely cruel to me for being a bad victim, because you weren't just condemning my behavior. You were being disgusting. The way that you talked about me, my pain, and my past is only the way that you talk about someone that you hate. This is not what erring on the side of caution and being more cautious than most looks like, Hiten. People aren't generally mad at you because you don't think awful people deserve your civility. They're mad at you because you're a giant, loud, obnoxious hypocrite. Hiten, you fucking suck, and I would be embarrassed to be anything like you. But you know what? I'm not going to come on here and say that you're full of shit in terms of saying that you think you care about the safety of others in that way. I'm not even going to say that you have to believe that other person's ideation. But I will ask that you put your money where your mouth is and either change your behavior to better align with what you say you give a fuck about, or change your outlook on things. Because right now your morals seem entirely conditional. And for someone who touts them as loud and with as much conviction as you, that pisses people off.
This year, several people reached out to me. Aaron Tempest, Lyle Convoy, and Ponder Sprocket all came to me and explained the details, Ponder especially. The two of us ended up having a very productive conversation where she explained to me the details of the situation that I had missed. For example, I didn't know that there were two different claimed victims of FEG. From what I'd seen, I thought they were the same person. At the time, I was going off of only Chuli's video, which, as everyone I spoke to agreed, did not convey the story well, which is why a newer video is currently in the works.
I'm going to try and go over this point and not get so fucking angry over what we're about to discuss. So Hiten here is trying to paint things as though my video was poorly done and poorly conveyed the story of my abuse with Feghost. So poorly, in fact, that it was easy to miss key details, like the fact that Feghost admitted to assaulting 2 girls, not just one, and that both had taken their own lives. So, okay, let's go ahead and see how I conveyed those details in my original video, which is still public, to see if it would truly be understandable that Hiten missed that detail. As I said, another allegation made in the doc, as well as the paceman later on, was one of Jay alleging that Feghost sexually assaulted her while making another girl, who we'll call A, watch after trapping them both in a room with them. A was said to have later committed suicide, and the paceman stipulates that Feghost was mentioned in the note, or at the very least the abuse was. Some may think that seems implausible because they think justice would have come of it, but I believe that's an ignorant view to take on the matter, as the sentencing rate for silence is extremely low in both the US and in Canada, where Feghost is from, made even worse by the fact that the victims, J and A, were said to have been trans women who the law is already incredibly unkind to, and admitted to being drunk and not only locking both girls in the room with them and groping Jay, who was drunk and consent, while the other girl was sober and had to sit and watch, but they also admitted to keeping both girls silent on the matter. No, Hiten! That detail was not poorly conveyed. You just fucking watched the video on mute with your eyes closed. This is not a valid point. This is not a valid excuse. And you and your friends are the only ones who somehow missed all the important details in my video. Even fucking Jar, shit person as he is, got this detail right in his sick and twisted joke about Feghost lies at my expense and at my friend's expense. And you know why? Because it was clear as day in my video.
Oh yeah, Feghost, you know that Ponder won't out people all too well. Like, didn't you make up a story about you sexually assaulting 2 trans women, which pushed them into committing toaster and bath or something? And then Ponder, Dulu, Izzy Hazard, and a few other people just kept their mouths shut about it for the longest time? Yeah, that was a weird thing that happened.
And you know what? Can we go back to what you said the misunderstanding was back in December last year when Ponder and you talked?
She straight up didn't know that a part of the story was that Jess had also allegedly killed herself, and that this was on us and had been weighing on us for years. She seemed legitimately surprised when I broke everything down and filled her in on the full context of what had been going on. According to her, she thought Jess had been arrested, and that was it. And the only girl who killed herself was the one from the beginning, which would have been on Feghost, not us.
So it went from that you knew there were 2 victims, but only one killed themselves during the time of the essay, to now it's that you only thought there was one person the entire time, and that the one person who was essayed was the same person that got arrested. Hiten. Come on. None of what Hiten says about her actions regarding my abuse story are honest. I believe that 100%. She either doesn't remember them genuinely or she's lying on purpose, both being very concerning. With that, I'd like to unpack some of your other lies about my video, like the gaslighting claim. Where the fuck did I ever gaslight Fighost in those screenshots? I can only imagine that the part she's referring to is this part where I show myself trying to explain to Fighost that it doesn't matter if she intended to manipulate my friend Clown or not, because at the end of the day, she tried to manipulate Clown surrounding a situation that had nothing to do with her. I even tried to tell her that a lot of manipulative people don't know that they're being manipulative, and that I was just trying to give her the space to recognize her behavior for what it was and change it. And that's it. That's what Hiten touts as gaslighting. I am not joking. I did not do anything else that could even be perceived as that. I did not grab 3 of my friends and tell them that I sexually assaulted 2 girls and give a one-man show acting out the part of my own fucking victims, and then make those friends feel like shit for no longer being comfortable around me later down the line and accuse them of talking shit about me and hurting me when they believed that lie. That was Fighost. And I didn't jump onto Twitter and tell you, hey Hiten, you need to back the fuck off of Junkie. You're not a victim. You're an evil bitch who wants to take down Junkie, not help the people he's hurt. Your video about him sucks. You gaslit Junkie. Don't you know how emotionally fragile he is? And you're putting him on blast to thousands of people? If he kills himself, it's gonna be your fault. And then turn around years later when people call me out and say, I never defended Junkie. What are you talking about? Stop gaslighting me. No, Hiten. That's you. Now, for the talking shit thing that she loves to bring up, she's talking about in 2021 when I vented to Clan about how uncomfortable I felt with Fighost with what I knew and how they were acting. Hiten, at the time that happened, I believed Fighost had sexually assaulted 2 trans girls, something that they regularly checked in on me with to make sure I wasn't saying anything. Of fucking course I was going to confide with one of the only other people that knew about that situation to express how uncomfortable I was with it and how I was being villainized for that. Why are you more focused on me talking behind a sex offender's back as though that makes me some kind of hypocrite when it doesn't? Fighost explicitly lied about me and twisted facts to pit people against me when they went to other people. I didn't do that. So again, why are you more upset about me talking behind a sex offender's back than the fact that I was having to deal with the sex offender in my friend group? Why the fuck do you care about how a sex offender feels about what I say about their acts of sexual misconduct, period? Hello? Is anyone realizing how wildly inappropriate that is? You're gonna say all this horrendous shit about my abuse, and then 2.5 years later when the fire is on your ass, you're gonna say, oh, well, it was all just a big misunderstanding, and then blame it on my video for not being well done? Seriously? No, Hiten. You said those things about me and pulled that interpretation from my video because you weren't paying attention, because you hated me and you weren't seeing the situation for what it was. So you know what? Way to go. In an attempt to use my original video as a scapegoat for why you were so misinformed on this situation, you outed yourself as a fucking idiot and made the truth of why your threat about me was so specific and dead set on making me look like a fucking demon that much more apparent. Congratulations. And no, there is not a new video in the works because my original video was bad. When Fighost revealed that she had lied about everything for 2 years, it changed the hue of all the abuse and manipulation that she had put us through. It is now necessary and would do us well as the victims to elaborate on just how deep the events of her abuse went, because it would show how she was manipulating us, draining us, and trying to pit my friends against me for her own personal gain. For you and your friends, like Musha, to twist that into an excuse for why you were all so stupidly misinformed about my trauma is just disgusting.
So, when it was explained more clearly, I realized immediately I had done wrong and went to remedy the issue. Ponder proofread my public statement, and I took down the original thread at the request of her and everyone else involved.
Girl, what the hell is going on here? You initially said that last year you sent me that private and public apology, which are dated as November and December of last year. However, now you're saying that Ponder proofread your statement, even though you say she only came to you this year. Hiten, You have the screenshots with the dates listed in them. You have the DMs of when the people confronted you about the issue. What the fuck are you doing? How are you expecting anyone to believe any of what you're saying when you can't even get the timeline straight with the proof you yourself are using? Now listen, I know that she's wrong about the timeline because I was there for all of it. All of it had to do with me and was directed at me. But other people don't know that. Why did you release this document with such blatant flaws?
As a matter of fact, the criticized line in the public apology about my mental state was Ponder's suggestion to make my actions clear.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't believe this. This doesn't sound like something Ponder would do. If this really did happen, I would not condone that. I know that Ponder and I have different sensibilities and different boundaries, but still, I don't believe this bet. I asked her about this, and she said she doesn't remember ever saying that, and I'm gonna believe her over the woman who's taken every opportunity she has when talking about my abuse to lie. Moving on.
I've also been told that I defended Feghost, which also never happened. Even in the original thread, I said that what she had done was unhinged and terrible. I've never said otherwise, and I do not know where the claim that I said otherwise is coming from.
You never defended Feghost? Are you fucking kidding me? Hiten, you were a full-on abuse apologist in your original thread. You denounced my video, said that I wasn't a victim of Feghost, said that I gaslit her into thinking she was a bad person, described her as mentally ill and emotionally fragile while calling me a manipulative, spiteful bitch that was playing weeping tragic victim, brought up a mistake I made as a 15-year-old to paint me as having always been a bitch for a long time, said you felt bad for Feghost, likened me to Rachel Mills, a serial abuser and sex pest, spread their narrative uncritically, and told me that bullying them off of their platforms was just as bad as me being stalked as a minor, so that I kept silent about SA. And now you want to say that you never defended Feghost and have no idea where that claim is coming from? This is why I don't buy your apologies. You refuse to be honest about what you did, and it makes it seem as though every apology you give, you have no idea what the hell you're actually meant to be apologizing for. Even though I literally unblocked you when I called you out in April and put all of your transgressions against me on blast, publicly. You have no excuse. And then you want to be like, oh, well, in my initial thread, I said that what she had done was bad. Like, oh, what? So now you can reference specific things you said in your thread? Now when you think you can use it to defend yourself? But now when it comes to being specific about the myriad of ways in which you were disgusting and lied about me, I don't care if it would have made your apology too long. Because it just goes to show how much you treated me like shit. And guess whose fault that is? It is absolutely ridiculously revealing to me that ever since you made your thread, you have been incredibly vague about the things you said, and have only gone into specifics when you're defending personal stances or trying to pretend that you actually did see how awful Feghost was. The one time you condemned Feghost at all in that thread was at the very end for one sentence in an addendum that you added after the fact. You can yap all you want, your actions still revealed your true feelings.
I also didn't speak about Chuli in 2022 because of an argument in a Discord server about a YouTuber drama from 2019. Anyone who has been around me or my content knows that these are values I've always held regarding anyone. I didn't like Jar victory lapping on my behalf regarding Junkie or Spocter. I don't like the comments about pushing someone unstable from Lyo. These are not things exclusive to Chuli and never have been.
Can we see how you've reacted on Twitter or in your videos to Jar and Lyo doing that? Because the only time you have ever publicly talked about either of them doing that, from what I can find, is this tweet about Jar. I want everyone to look at these two reactions and see if they can find any differences in how she reacted to Jar versus how she reacted to me. You cannot talk about me how you did, make me the villain of the entire situation, deny my victimhood, and say you feel bad for everyone involved except me, and act like this wasn't personal. It was. You made that so fucking clear. You felt bad for the self-admitted sex offender and chronic liar, no questions, because they have mental health issues, but not me, because I guess I posted too many crabs on Twitter. And I said that you made it that way because of the hatred you had for me because of that argument in 2019, because it was the first thing you immediately brought up and lied about me with in an attempt to justify why we no longer spoke to each other. So yes. Maybe the actions you say you didn't like were not exclusive to me, but the way you talked about me and the morals you pushed onto me absolutely were. And I am so tired of you acting like that whole thread wasn't you acting out your grudge and hatred on me now that you're getting flamed. I don't know what to tell you. You showed your ass in this situation, and yet you still want to act so flabbergasted on where people are getting this from.
I've said time and time and time again that I'm a flawed individual, and I know where my weaknesses lie. It's why I always consider myself open to criticism. One of those is an issue with impulsivity that I have been actively trying to curb, and did so by taking my time to have everything in order before I responded to everything.
Is that what you call this document? This document is you having everything in order. Seriously.
Unfortunately, bad actors continue to try and gaslight me into believing I said things I never said, or ascribe intent to me that I never had. But also, unfortunately, there's not a lot of veil when it comes to me. I'm a direct and honest person, so you can usually assume what I said is what I meant, good or bad.
No, you aren't, Hiten. No, you are not. You have lied so much about me in just this document alone. Never mind the multitude of times you have since the beginning. You have been proven to not be truthful with how you talk about me and your involvement in what I've been through. I don't care if it's malintent or reckless disregard. It's fucked up, and I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of you. You want to end off this shitfest of a document by being like, you can really just assume what I mean most of the time because I'm just so honest. When everything I've said about your intent and actions is based on words that you've said. But instead of just apologizing for those things, you're lying about the timeline of events and how you acted in them, telling people that I'm a bad actor, that I'm lying about your intent and painting you as a monster. I have not lied about your intent and painted you as a monster like you have done so to me. The only person that has lied about me and painted me as a monster and tried to pit my friends against me like you is Fighost, okay? So how dare you be like, oh, I'm just too honest, it's a fault. Fucking act like it.
I absolutely refuse to have people tell me that I am something I am not ever again, but I am also willing to admit that I haven't been an angel. I never pretended I was. That's that on that, I guess. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Hiten, you need to never do this again. I legitimately don't understand how someone can act like you. You see, despite the fun I had on Twitter finally getting to put Hiten on blast for all of her bullshit, Figgos's abuse of me and my friends and the shit that you did to me is pretty painful to talk about. And it's certainly not fair for me to have to come on here and talk about it because you refuse to tell the truth. Yes, you're allowed to respond to the allegations I put forth against you, but when you do nothing but lie about my abuse in that response and deflect and put blame onto me, it's totally reasonable for me to say, that's enough. Because you refuse to come out here and just admit to and own up to not only your role in doing the things that you've done, but lying about your involvement in them and causing people to say disgusting things about me over your lies, then yeah, I have the full right to say that I don't want you talking about this anymore. And I'm glad that you've been sticking to that. And I hope it stays that way after this video comes out, because Lord knows I'm tired of you and I'm tired of your friends. That's why I don't want an apology. But God save your soul, you better fucking remember how to give one if you ever think about crossing a bitch like me again. I do not want to hear a single peep out of you. Especially because your document had the same effect that your original thread did in 2021, where now people are acting like I'm just a crazy bitch for still being mad at you and calling you out, going as far as to speculate that I must be letting paranoia from Figgos abuse take control of me, and that's why I'm acting up. Some people from the Cat Slayer, and back when it was the Senate, and another server known as the Supreme Court, in particular, have said things that are remarkably similar to things you said about me and caused others to say about me in 2021. Like the idea that I'm just obsessed with being right, obsessed with Hiten, wondering and puzzling why I'm so concerned about this situation and arguing what Hiten says about it. Gee, I don't fucking know, guys. Maybe because Hiten has used every time she's talked about my abuse to lie. Maybe if you guys would empathize with me for half a second, you might understand that I would want to fight back against that. And as for the complaint that I'm being too mean and spiteful towards Hiten, I'm sorry, did we all forget who we're talking about?
You are going to die! I am going to kill you! I will spend the rest of my life tracking you down. You will never see me again. I will not see you. I am coming for you!
Unlike you swooning prima donna wannabes, you can shove it up your fat ass for all I care. You are low-life, backstabbing scum at best, and duplicitous, manipulative dangers at your worst. The only thing I didn't do was reopen my DMs with the scaly lizard fucker who hurt me. You are bumbling, simpering weaklings. Shut the
fuck up? Good God. Spoilers, if you weren't a fucking scumbag in private, we wouldn't make these things community issues. I don't want your disingenuous, half-hearted, slimy bitch boy apology. I don't want your disingenuous, slimy bitch boy apology either, Spock. My Legionnaires have said multiple times they like my more harsh, aggressive tone. Fuck off, junkie. Go fuck yourself, goodbye. God forbid I say mean words about someone who tried to ruin my fucking life. Get the fuck out of here. I will make you be an adult, and you will take the accountability in the way that you should be taking it, not the way you want to take it. No hiding, no running. You are done. Good riddance. I point this out, and Tippy tries to shout me down, which is a losing battle 100 times out of 100. I am always going to be louder than you.
I think that most, if not all, of the people complaining about my attitude in this mess are just mad that I knocked Hiten down with the energy she carries for everyone she goes after. Honest to God, all I can say is sucks to suck. Sorry I outscreamed your scream queen. You know, I could have gone harder in this video. I really feel like if I talked about Hiten in this video the way she talked about everyone else, there probably would have been riots in the SCC streets. I've already gotten on the bad side of these Discord servers as showcased, and pretty much all of Heten's friends blocked me. Fuck, half the SCC blocked me. Which is wild considering none of them did that shit when she acted how she did towards me. Probably because a lot of them agreed with her. Why? No idea. Maybe I should try being a fucking white girl instead. Maybe that would help. Because I've been meaning to point out for a while that I find it really funny that my melanated ass is one of the only people in this pasty corner of the internet that ever has to deal with civility politics. I've known for a while that these communities have had some weird race issues, but after I called out a white creator right before Hiten for banning even the mildest of pro-Palestine activism from his stream and complaining about it, I got jumped by several white creators in both public and private, and was politely explained to that these creators had the right to ban anti-genocide statements from their platforms because they'd rather not think about it. Yeah, I wonder if those same people have any kind of problem with someone who looks like me being abrasive and not catering to all of this nonsense. I don't even have to wonder that much because people in the Cat Slayer have already stated that me bringing up my traumatic past is me pretending that I'm the only one with trauma, especially in the POC community, whatever the fuck that is. Everything over these past few years has just proven to me that I should have never gotten involved with this corner of the internet. And I honestly just feel sorry for my younger self that I ever had the misfortune of getting tangled up with a group of people so callous and unempathetic towards me that they treated me like absolute shit during my most vulnerable time and continue to try and gaslight me for being hurt like I have. I also need to reiterate strongly here that while I am the youngest victim of Faghost as far as we know, I am not the only victim, and I'm offering Clownteeth a spot to speak their truth on this situation and how the community, how Hiten, ruined so much for us with how horrible they were. I also offered a feature to Pondersprocket, one of the only other victims that we know of, for her to do the same, but she refused at this time, citing that she is afraid of her upset and feelings being flipped to use against her in the future. And given how I've seen that very thing happen, I don't hold it against her. This entire mess has left Ponder with a ton of trust issues that simultaneously leave her not wanting to believe people, but also trying not to assume the worst. She's working past it at her own pace, but given the magnitude of everything, it's a little bit more difficult than one might imagine. With that out of the way, here is Klownteeth.
Hello. So I'm just going to keep things brief in my statement and go over the things that are relevant to me only. My opinion on Hiten is very similar to Chuli's for obvious reasons. Frankly, I have been very angry and upset with her since her initial thread. I am going to try to keep myself calm as I explain my viewpoints on this woman's deplorable actions. Starting off with the initial parts of the thread where I am mentioned. She says, verbatim, that this was my story to tell. Chuli doesn't get to play the tragic weeping victim for supporting me going through a hard time, then says she feels bad for me. and Phagos. First of all, while it is true I faced the brunt of Phagos' manipulation and wrath, you want to guess what most of those conversations were usually about? When Chuli set a boundary Phagos couldn't violate, she ran to me to make my life hell because she couldn't get the closure she demanded. She would go off about how Chuli was shit-talking when she wasn't, and how her actions of confiding in me about her being a possible sex offender was going too far. Hell, I even remember a call I had with her where she demanded I say either yes or no when asking if Chuli's actions were out of pocket. So no, Hiten, it wasn't just my story. So how dare you say that Chuli isn't a victim and put me on top of the mountain of shit you threw at her? I don't know if it was because I had no qualms with her or anyone else who was spewing such disgusting shit, but it shouldn't fucking matter, and I cannot believe this has to be said. Why were you so determined to protect a chronic liar's mental health? Which, speaking of that, please, for the love of God, stop insinuating I need to cater to Phagos' mental health. I do not care what she does. I do not care about anything she wants. Look what happened when I did care for her. I was strung along like a puppet and was manipulated when she wasn't getting what she wanted, all the while lying about everything just to fuck with my emotions for her own sick reasons. She never cared for me. Not a single moment do I believe she saw me as a friend, just someone she could mess with. I don't need your moral grandstanding on what you think is right or wrong and calling out abusive people. Please shut up. What made this even more frustrating is I had people who were so supportive of my art and praised me after this whole shit show went down, only to find out they liked and supported Hiten's thread. This is just to set the record straight, but do you all think I wouldn't know? That I wouldn't be uncomfortable with being praised while my best friend was completely shut down and shamed? Am I living in the Twilight Zone? Because that's what it felt like. To express the emotions I was going through, I was constantly questioning my own victimhood. It felt like I was getting put on a pedestal that I didn't want, and the severity of what Phagos did to us was not being taken seriously. I was in a state of disbelief that only grew after she posted her Spocter video. I was anxious all the time, I had constant headaches, just in a state of doubting myself and just shitting on myself for not doing enough. All the while I had to sit in silence, while Hiten was praised, protected, and had her voice elevated. I didn't feel like I could call Phagos my abuser, that I didn't have the right to even use a term that heavy. And I felt guilty. I just felt guilty that my friend was being painted as this horrible person, while I just got the opposite reaction. I was angry. And I'm still angry. If I had trust issues then, they would have skyrocketed even more after all these horrible years. What's even crazier is that this isn't the only time Hiten has mentioned me or said things to me. On April 7th, 2023, I posted a video called My 2017 Trauma, which was basically me coming out about what had happened behind the scenes during my drama after Lyle Convoy posted a video regarding people from my past. In that video, I shared a lot of the dark and traumatic things that a lot of people didn't know about since it was mostly offline. It was very hard for me to come out about, but I knew I had to because it was the first time in years where I felt I wasn't crazy. Hiten, I guess, because she played an integral part in my drama, commented on my video saying the following: "I'm glad you're out of that situation. You have become a better and stronger person. Where your pain manifested doesn't matter. It's still valid. I'm glad you're free and safe. Wish you nothing but healing and happiness." I have never deleted a comment so fast. Her thread was up for 2 years at this point. She still stood by it. She just sent this with such compassion that I was just horrified. It's terrifying how impulsive she is with her anger. How she could go off about Chuli, and she wasn't just being harsh, she was being genuinely disgusting. Then comes to me all super kind, like, how can you be so kind to me when you knew damn well you shamed my friend and stood up for my abuser? This was proof to me that she was just completely dishonest. It felt like a slap in the face. Oh, this trauma you went through? Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish you nothing but happiness. But this other one? Nah, your friend was actually the manipulative one. I feel bad for you and your abuser. Like, what on earth? If I had to be honest, and this is just my opinion, so take this with a massive grain of salt, Hiten's whole I'll scream louder persona persona is a red flag to me. Especially since this isn't who she actually is. When that same energy was brought onto her with hard truths and evidence, she crumbled, saying, "I'll be lucky if I don't end up in the hospital, take your W, I guess," which was just so passive-aggressive. I think the reason I'm so put off by this persona she has is that I grew up in an environment with a parental figure who would scream over me if I dare try to call out the negative things they did to me. I was screamed at, talked over, shut down, and made to feel like I was the one at fault for being upset. So when I see a person like her with an audience that gets hyped for her to yell at people, it's just gross to me. This is not something to be proud of. In my opinion, I think she either needs to realize this angry energy isn't healthy or just stop entirely. She pointed it at the wrong person and made a complete ass out of herself as a result. Hiten was totally fine with defending insults against a neurodivergent woman during the Rosa call. She was okay with bullying someone because she didn't like them and it was under the notion that they did something terrible. Rosa is no saint, mind you, but no one deserves to go through that. Compare that to this situation where she held onto a grudge with a then 16-year-old Chuli over a situation she escalated, but regardless, she thought Chuli did something awful. She held on to that for years, to the point she was willing to defend their abuser over them. Her bias harms people she needs to stop. And finally, just to get this out of the way, Artemi Musha is a cowardly loser. I responded to his recent thread where he was calling Chuli's tweets showing Hiten's disgusting actions with evidence as a social media meltdown, while also vaguely wishing bad things to happen to them. You know, the most totally normal thing to say. I was very not happy, so I quoted him, calling him out on the shit he did, and he responded to me. Won't lie, there were parts that messed with my head. Anxiety sucks. I wasn't able to save the response because he locked his account because people chewed him out for how fucking insane he was being. The main parts that are important are claiming he removed the segment in the video I brought attention to due to wanting to stand by his morals. He thinks I would know this? And even if it was removed, you never apologize and you're still vilifying Chuli, so what the fuck? Your morals are just non-existent, so stop clenching for them. He talked like he was playing 4D chess by not bringing up key details, then proceeded to say, "Clown, you're smarter than this," before giving me grief about showing the same aggression he had issues with, ending it with him saying that he and the other victims of Rei Kohai didn't appreciate me dragging her name into this. My brother in Christ, you started this shit. You mentioned Chuli in your Rei video. You compared Chuli to Rei in your thread. How the hell is that my fault? You want to paint me as some stupid idiot for being angry, but at least I'm not the degenerate who compared a victim to not one, but 3 serial abusers, which included V Omega. Even when people called you out, you tried to say, well, I compared them because they were all letdowns. Yeah, letdowns because they ended up being sex pest abusers, my dude. Just stay gone. You are just a vile human being. I fully respect that Hiten is not going to watch this video. I was in her position many years ago. Even though I made the choice to watch the videos made on me, it left me even more traumatized, so I understand her stance completely. All I want is that she never talks about the Fago stuff ever again. Not even retweets or shoutouts, just silence. I don't want her talking about Chuli ever again as well. I just want her, as Chuli said years ago, to stay in her lane. I don't want her support. I don't even feel comfortable being in any space with her present, period now. Even members of the Senate victim shamed Chuli once her tweets got traction, because Hiten is oh so loved. Before anyone says anything, no, I'm not blaming Lyle for this at all. He's not responsible for watching every Discord user in his server like a hawk. That would be insanely unreasonable. For the sake of my own mental health, I just need to be away from these spaces and just the community at large. Especially since people in the Supreme Court, God, these fucking names, were trying to paint Chuli and me as mentally unwell for calling this out. It hit me a bit harder personally. Like, I can laugh off the pain, but there's just a part of me who felt genuinely hurt by the fact people think me standing alongside my best friend is me going through paranoia as a result of Fagos abuse. Jesus Christ. I stated in the past I didn't want anything to do with this community anymore, and the main reason I orbited was because of fucking Faye Ghost, cause she can never leave us the fuck alone. I stand by Julie and will continue to. Not just because I am also a victim of Faye Ghost, but this whole thing was a complete injustice and deserves to be publicly known. This isn't just some petty squabble that can be resolved in a private call. This is a person who is a walking hypocrite and vile enough to victim shame a person over petty reasons. I hope to God that people understand us and that the truth is out there, because I would very much like to feel some sort of normalcy in my life again. I will talk about Faye Ghost again in greater detail in the future, but for now, all I can say is this. Julie has been there for me since 2017. She has helped me during my darkest times and helped me gain the confidence to stand up for myself after dealing with so many awful people in my life. I think the least I can do is return the favor and support her through this. Please support Julie. She has faced so many horrible things being said towards her and that she did not deserve. She faced so many terrible people trying to strip away her victimhood. I'm frankly sickened by it. All of this disgusting shit over 2 tweets telling her abuser to fuck off. Hiten and everyone else should feel genuinely ashamed of themselves. Hiten, I hope to God you learned a hard lesson after this. I never want to see you ever again. I don't want any support from you, nothing. Please gain some self-awareness and focus on more positive things. Learn to keep your thoughts to yourself. You crossed so many lines and continue to lie about them because you know deep down you fucked up. I trust even if you aren't watching this, it is clear that your opinion isn't wanted in this situation. So let's hope it stays that way. Thank you all for listening. I'm out.
A huge thank you to Clownteeth for sharing her perspective in this whole mess. The two of us grew closer together during the time that everything was happening, and getting to talk to her and ponder Sprocket over the last year and finally understanding how we all process the abuse and manipulation has been absolutely amazing. The three of us spent a lot of time together back in June when they visited me for VidCon, and I couldn't have been happier at that time. It's allowed for me to try healing from the damage that not only Fagos did, but the community hammered in extra deep afterwards. It's honestly really fucking funny that people will disingenuously try to bring up the effect that Fagos' abuse and lies had on me as a way to explain why I'm being so crazy and unreasonable, because they really did have an effect on me. I know this isn't something I should really entertain because the sentiment is pretty gross, but I know there are some people out there who don't think that the situation, when put on paper, sounds super damaging. Like, they don't hear the situation and think of it as something abusive that causes trauma, especially because, like, it's the internet and that whole thing of things online being taken less seriously. And you know what? Maybe to certain people, this situation would not have been traumatic or abusive and things would have been caught and ended a lot sooner. But I'm going to give some extra context to explain why that definitely was not the case for me. Many of you know that I started my channel when I was young. I was 14 when I started making videos. And in that time, from when I was 14 till I became an adult, my time online was littered with adult men having sexual conversations with me, sending me porn, joking with me about sexual topics and their sexual preferences, and even sexually harassing me and degrading me in front of others. All with the knowledge of how old, or rather, how young I was. A lot of this I excused mentally, even though I wasn't comfortable, because they were either gay men, so I didn't feel like I had a valid threat to speak up on because they weren't technically attracted to me, or because it was delivered in the form of memes and jokes. I've made vague mention of the sexual harassment I experienced on a couple of occasions, including my original Fagos video, as well as, I believe, the Fagos Senate call, and I know I specifically called out one creator who harassed me in front of others. But believe me when I say that there's a lot more that I haven't talked about. Many of you may know of a creator by the name of V Omega, who, if you don't know, groomed minors and even sexually assaulted someone. When I was 15, V, who was 19 at the time, on multiple occasions sent me very explicit porn he drew. One of those drawings he sent me 4 times in one day to update me on the progress of it. And on that day, I even got into a conversation with him about sexual preferences and innocently remarked how all of my friends in the SCC had a specific preference, except for one man that I knew. That man being Caden, who is known online as Caden Monroe, and he was 27 at the time. You might notice that it's a little weird that a 15-year-old would know the sexual preferences of a 27-year-old man, and that's because it is, and bad stuff was indeed happening behind the scenes. Look, I'm just gonna lay it straight. When I was 14, 15, I was essentially groomed by several adult men in the SCC/adjacent into entertaining their sexualities, which we can see happening in my DMs with V Omega, where I was basically taught that being sent porn and having sexual conversations with adult men was normal. I'm not saying it was a coordinated effort necessarily, but it was more than one man. It was several men, and I entertained them when I was 15 as I was taught to. That is until I was about halfway through 16 and I stopped and started pushing back. Now, I haven't been friends with Caden or been close to him in any regard for a while now, and for a long time I just had vague negative feelings about him with no true understanding of why. And that little mention of him in V's DMs was my only breadcrumb, but nothing beyond that. That is until I searched through my DMs with a friend who I vented to a lot back in the day, and I found instances back in 2019 when I detailed a list of times I was sexually harassed by Caden, wherein the gist is basically that he would push sexual boundaries, often under the guise of comedy, either by comments directly crudely sexualizing me, or by posting and saying very inappropriate, often explicit things in front of me. One of these instances happened publicly on a friend's live stream, who I don't blame because they were extremely high at the time and were barely listening. I have the audio from that incident, but I don't want to post it because I would be so uncomfortable with that being public because it's so humiliating and demoralizing. But just know that in every instance, I would ask him, beg him to stop, and to him it meant keep going and try to justify why it was okay for him to do that. And the one time he did stop is because another adult witnessing what was happening shut it down very sternly. But that didn't stop him from repeating the incident again when they weren't around. Now, evidently, I knew how to stand up for myself in the moment, but I didn't know how to ask for support or coordinate a confrontation at the time. When I basically rediscovered all of these locked memories in the middle of writing this script, I had a really bad few weeks, to say the least, and it's a big reason why this video is coming out as late as it is. I told my friends what happened, including the one who shut Caden down initially, and they helped me set up a confrontation with him. In that call, I even played the audio to him of when he did harass me on the stream, and he did profusely apologize for what he had done. And he did do what I asked of him, which was to take a break from his platform for a couple of weeks while he reflected on the knowledge of his actions. He knows that I'm talking about this publicly, and I expect him to address it publicly in his own words as well. Originally, I was going to say something here about how I'm not personally coming forward with this information because I want to destroy Caden's career and whatever he's doing online. But I realize it shouldn't matter. I should be able to come forward about this for whatever reason I want. I don't want what happened to me as a minor in these communities to be a dirty little secret. And just like with Faghost, I don't think it's fair to make a victim cater to the person who victimized them just because the victimizer is afraid of consequences. Hello. So I need to foot a little addendum here that I did not plan on doing prior to like a week before this video goes out. So recently I was contacted by Laka about V Omega, and I shared with him all of the DMs and testimony I could of V being expressly inappropriate with me while I was a minor, including the screenshot where I mentioned Caden. I told him he was allowed to share all of the screenshots and testimony except for the one that mentioned Caden, because I wanted to be the one to tell that story to the public. And he agreed and respected that. And Laka, thank you so much for doing that, because as you know, and as everyone is about to find out, that was not a privilege I had before. You see, the reason why Laka even knew that I was victimized by V Omega at all is because that information was shared in a video by Bummer Patrol, also known as Dalsmic, back in 2021. The information in the screenshot included in that video was published without my consent or even knowledge. But you know what? Until recently, I thought about just forgetting that and telling the full story anyways, as if it was the first time anyone was hearing about it. Because the video was deleted when Doll ethered the Bummer Patrol channel, even though I knew that the video still existed on an archive website. That is until Laka told me that the archive of the video was circulating again, and how people were looking at and talking about that humiliating screenshot of me being sent porn as a 15-year-old that I didn't have a say in being posted. And the reason it was going around again is because V Omega was found to have come back under a different alias. And they knew that because Doll was talking to him through that alias in 2022. So let me get this straight. You couldn't be bothered to talk to the person whose child abuse images you were about to post for everyone to see even once to make sure they were okay with it or even knew, but went out of your way to play footsie with the abuser and talk to him about how he did sexually abuse minors and was in a server chock full of minors. Boy, fuck you. Okay. Back to the regular video. So, anyways, as you can tell, the stuff with V happened before Faghost fed me the story, long before, and the thing with Caden happened both long and right before Faghost fed me the story. And after I was fed the assault story by Faghost, I was sexually harassed twice in Spectre's Patreon Discord server when I was 17. Both, again, by adult men. One of these I've discussed publicly already on Twitter, and yes, it was Digby the Goat, who, after raiding the server and making inappropriate comments about very sensitive topics, started arguing with me in front of Spectre and referred to it as this. And when I immediately made him aware of my age to tell him how inappropriate this kind of comment was, he said I was too old for him. He did stop after a slap on the wrist from Spectre, but was allowed to stay in the server after that point. So that was awful, and just reinforced to me that those kinds of transgressions against me as someone who was underage weren't even really that big of a deal, despite how terrible they made me feel. And it felt even worse knowing what I knew about Fagos victims, because I would think, this makes me feel so terrible, and I bullied someone who went through a physically violent sexual encounter. Especially because at the time, Fagos was a whole-ass self-identified man who I knew was 6'4", and I could empathize with the physical helplessness, even in a non-sexual manner, because I do know firsthand what it's like to repeatedly have someone bigger and stronger put their hands on you when you're unable to do anything about it. So it's not that I couldn't imagine what it must have been like to actually be the victim in the story Fagos made up. It's that I could imagine it perfectly. And it's so fucking awesome that they decided to put that in my head as a 16-year-old. So think about this the next time you want to liken someone you don't like to V Omega or any other sexual predator who was around them when they were a minor. Musha. And think about this the next time you want to make a crude visual skit and make a joke out of the sexual assault story you know was fed to a minor, just a robot. Seriously. You're both fucking pathetic. And for anyone else who wants to keep chastising me for not coming forward sooner and covering for a predator like the fucking robot, maybe, I don't know, shut the fuck up. There's 1,000,001 reasons people have for not coming forward about something and making what's logically the wrong decision. Made even worse when those fears are proven right. Like, literally look at what happened when I did do the right thing. You think anyone wants that? Seriously, think for just a second. Hopefully this video is contextualizing a lot of the reasons for me on why it took so long to come forward, and why I continued to keep quiet about the aftermath. But just to set the record straight, I was victimized online as a minor for several years in a row to increasing severity, and even then I ultimately was the one to come forward after being an adult for a year, only for all of this to happen as a result. So yeah, to anyone talking shit to this day, I really hope you're jealous of my position. There is nothing fun about these incidents I've described. None of this is fun to talk about. In fact, the period of weeks where I was accepting the reality of what happened to me were probably the hardest weeks emotionally for me since I had to come forward about Faghost. Because yeah, it wasn't fun when I had to come forward about Faghost, despite what some people may believe. I spent the entire month when I was making that video sick to my stomach, because the experience of being victimized, especially in a sexual manner, is incredibly demoralizing, and there's rarely any joy to come from anything to do with it ever. I meant it when I said that my heart breaks for younger me ever getting involved with that sick and twisted group of people, because it's clear to me that I was in all the wrong hands. The people who would have cared didn't know, and the people who did know didn't care, minus my friends, who I asked not to say anything. All that to say, yes, Fagos' actions had a huge effect on me, and back in 2021 when I cut them off and was deciding to make the original expose, I reflected on a lot of my behavior, and I started apologizing to friends for how I acted when Fagos was in my life, because I was different. I was shorter with people, I snapped more frequently, I read apologies and kind gestures as a means to manipulate, because that's how I had to be with Fagos, and as aforementioned, all the other adult men who violated my boundaries, especially my sexual boundaries. Granted, Fagos did not create those behaviors, but they did intensify them a lot with how close they were and how much they were around. And as I'm sure you could imagine, based off of the aftermath of everything, I still struggle with all of those things in the present day to a pretty severe extent. But in that sweet spot, I started unblocking a lot of people on social media, thinking about letting go of any old hurt or suspicion I had for a lot of people and moving on with the present, unsure of how valid my previous judgments were. Hiten was one of those people. Certain friends of Hiten that were also friends of mine sometimes talked about their issues with her and how she treated them that I didn't like. And since we hadn't talked since the Eugenia Cooney argument, which was over a year prior, I just blocked her to make sure that she didn't show up on my feed. But after cutting off Fagos, I thought, maybe she's not all that bad. She's been through her own stuff, and hey, she released that junkie video documenting the hurt she went through because of him. So I shouldn't be too hard on her, and I unblocked her. And I was honestly getting ready to open up a little bit more as a person on my platform. But obviously that never ended up happening. The fact that the discourse surrounding the situation shifted entirely from Fagos' abuse, the sexual assault allegations, and later the revelation that Fagos lied to a minor about being a sexual assailant and her victims committing suicide, how the discourse shifted from that to how much of a nasty, manipulative, spiteful bitch I was for being mean to them on Twitter, really showed me where everyone's priorities were. And that was how much nobody here liked me or cared about the abuse I suffered, and just how much they didn't see me as a person. In a scenario where I was victimized as a minor by an adult that was a public figure with a ton of connections, that was the takeaway in this community to these creators. Because don't you know, the abuser has feelings. This corner of the internet completely failed me because I was a bad victim for 2 seconds on the most personally upsetting and devastating day of my time online. And it makes me so fucking happy to just watch it get bulldozed this year. I don't care if that's cruel. I can't do it anymore. If you're someone who I spoke to during the time of when Hiten apologized and I had said that I forgave you, I'm sorry, but I can't keep that door open anymore. It is too painful and unfair for me to have to leave my door open to people who are a part of and associate themselves with a community of people that treated me so terribly, especially since some of those people that told me they were on my side continue to uncritically support and be friends with Hiten without ever bothering to check in on how I am, just as it happened in 2021. That's not good enough. That's not how you show that you have someone's back. And I don't deserve to have to deal with people like that anymore. Will there be exceptions to that? Maybe. But who I decide to trust moving forward is my business. As a send-off, Hiten, I don't care if you have a platform. Originally, I was going to have this whole spiel about why she should justify her presence still. And then I realized I don't fucking care. So long as Hiten stays in her lane for the rest of time, which it looks like she's been doing that for the past few months, and honestly, good. Stay there. The rest of the SCC should follow, because it's been proven that a lot of y'all really can't be trusted. And it brightens my day so much that everyone seems to be aware of that now. So, another addendum. As I was almost done editing this video, I find out that Hiten has left commentary. I watched her video, and I'm gonna be honest, the issues that she talks about the community having are valid. I agree with the criticism she said she's received, but I know her hurt is real because so are the issues that caused it. And yet, I have to laugh. that she talks about the issues in the community from this above-it-all attitude, as though she wasn't the monster she speaks of in the community that everyone failed to speak up against. To say she's tired of babysitting, like she didn't effectively bitch about her not being babysat on the way she treated me, for why it took so long for her to realize it was wrong. To talk about the community failing victims, like she wasn't the biggest player and contributor to the failure of the community dealing with the abuse I was put through, with the people in your server admitting to not caring anymore the second I was mean to Fagos and focusing more on my behavior as a victim. And you didn't give a fuck. I have to laugh because I know everything else I'll do if I don't. Is it cruel to do this to someone's grief? Probably. Do I care? No, not in the slightest. I could go on and on about this, but I think it's getting repetitive. So my final words to Hiten leaving commentary? Well, I think she said it best. Good riddance to you and the leopards eating faces community. You're so sad. Ate yours. As for me, I originally planned to say that I probably would not return as a creator in this space, but after going to VidCon with a bunch of the current art girls and other commentators, I think I might. The people I spent that vacation with were so sweet and kind and understanding of my whole ordeal, and they even encouraged me to return to the scene. April really changed everything. I used to have so many reservations about speaking up about the obvious wrongs done to me by these communities, but after causing like 5 people to go private on their Twitter accounts or leave the platform altogether by simply standing my ground and putting on the heat, it really became apparent to me that none of these shit stains are anything I can't handle. Also, just like so many of the bad people who hurt me are just straight up gone. The SCC imploded worse than ever before, and it looks like the ACC has been taken over by a whole new group of people over the years who seem to be way more sensible than the previous batch. So, you know what? If you want to go see me after this, whenever I decide to get off my ass and make videos again, go subscribe to this channel, because I think I want to leave this one behind with all of this nonsense. And with that, thank you to everyone who stuck around for this whole thing. I appreciate you, especially if you're someone who didn't call me a crazy bitch and a piece of shit for lashing out at my abuser, and also later on for being mad about how people dogpiled me for it. For everyone who did do that, reflect on your damn selves. Okay, goodbye.